I've been in Rome for the past few days, reveling in the Roman history, which is a particular interest of mine, coming as I do from Colchester, the first Roman capital city of Britain, where I grew up surrounded by Roman ruins and Roman history. In Rome, I clambered about on the Colosseum, wandered in the Forum, and stood gobsmacked beneath the astounding dome of the Pantheon. I also managed to fulfill a small ambition and visit the world's smallest nation, Vatican City. And it was at the Vatican this last Wednesday that I had a rather surreal experience. I met the Pope, which was about the last thing I expected to happen. If you want to visit St. Peter's Basilica, the enormous cathedral that dominates Vatican City, you are advised to do so very early in the morning to beat the enormous crowds that gather year-round. So, rising long before dawn on Wednesday, my wife and I made our way to St. Peter's Square. Nobody was about, and searching for the queue, we spotted a few dozen people standing in the cold behind the left colonnade of St. Peter's, and we joined them. But after a while, it became clear that the queue wasn't for St. Peter's Basilica, which we found out was actually closed on Wednesdays until noon, but for an audience with the Pope. After checking with some Vatican officials at the head of the line, it was indeed true, and you didn't even need a ticket. Everyone appeared to be devout Catholics, many of whom appeared to have come from across the world to see Pope Francis in the flesh. Passing through airport-style security, we were taken to the vast and modern Pope Paul VI Audience Hall, built in 1971 to the left of St. Peter's, which can hold up to 6,000 people. It is dominated by a massive and rather grotesque sculpture of the Resurrection. As you enter, you are watched carefully by stony-faced members of the Swiss Guard, the Vatican's tiny army. We managed to find seating just behind the area reserved for people who were going to be personally introduced to the Pope. We waited for an hour or so before the doors on the left of the stage were opened, and there was the Pope, hobbling in with the aid of a walking stick. At 87 years old, and not in the best of health, he progressed slowly and with evident difficulty to a large white chair, followed by what looked like two of his doctors, carrying black bags, and were seated. I have to say, the atmosphere inside the hall was electric, and the audience's evident love and respect for Pope Francis was palpable.
Introducendola con il segno della croce e il saluto liturgico. Disponiamoci ad accogliere la sua parola e a ricevere la sua benedizione.
Nel nome del Padre, del Figlio e dello Spirito Santo. Amen. La pace sia con voi.
The Pope blessed the audience and thanked them for coming, and then various speeches followed in various languages. And then the Pope delivered his own address.
Nel Natale 1223, San Francesco realizzò a Greccio i presepi viventi. È nato il presepi. Qual è stata l'intenzione di San Francesco? Diceva così: vorrei rappresentare il bambino nato a Betlemme e in qualche modo vedere con gli occhi del corpo i disagi in cui si è trovato per la mancanza delle cose necessarie a un neonato, come fu adagiato in una greppia e come giaceva.
The following is a summary of the Holy Father's catechesis at the beginning of the audience. Dear brothers and sisters, 800 years ago this Christmas in Greccio, St. Francis of Assisi recreated the scene of our Lord's birth. The lovely tradition of setting up a Christmas crib in our family reminds us of the true meaning of Christ's nativity, the closeness of our God, who came among us in poverty to enrich us with the gift of his saving love. May our contemplation of the crib inspire us to celebrate these holy days in simplicity, spiritual joy, and gratitude for the gift of Christ's presence among us, the source of our hope, the light of our lives, and the promise of peace for our troubled world. The Holy Father will now greet us in Italian.
Do benvenuto a tutti i pellegrini di lingua inglese, specialmente quelli provenienti da Malesia e Nigeria. Nell'imminenza del Santo Natale invoco su voi e sulle vostre famiglie la gioia e la pace del Signore Gesù, Figlio di Dio e Principe della pace. Dio vi benedica.
At the conclusion of the audience, His Holiness delivered a blessing.
Domino Vobiscum. Sit nomen Domini benedictum.
Ex hoc nunc et usque in seculum.
Aiuterium nostrum in nomine Domini.
Qui fecit caelum et terra.
Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater, et Filius, et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen.
It was at this point, as the Pope was transferred to a wheelchair, that we realized that he was going to meet and greet the audience. He was slowly wheeled along the line of invited guests, many of whom appeared to be newly married couples, spending a few moments chatting with each of them. And as he passed, the chairs were quietly cleared away, and the invited members of the audience left. But the Pope wasn't quite finished yet. The benefit of being some of the first into the queue outside the hall meant that we were almost at the first row of the audience when the Pope made a couple of passes along the front to greet the uninvited guests, like us, who had waited patiently to see him. In a fairly surreal moment, I found myself in touching distance of the Pope, and he smiled and waved as he was pushed past, a genuine warmth and friendliness emanating from him. I'm not a Catholic, growing up Church of England, but it is easy to see why Francis is one of the more popular popes of modern times. He has the common touch. After some photos with Swiss guards, my wife and I found ourselves once more in St. Peter's Square, a bit dazed by the experience, but nonetheless very pleased. We came to Rome to see the historical sites, but never imagined ending up an arm's length from the living embodiment of so much of that long history. Well, it's certainly a Christmas I will always remember. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for supporting this channel this year, and to wish all of you and your families a very Merry Christmas, wherever you are in the world.